Literally no offense to anything. They're very proud to cast a Latino actress as Snow White. It makes no sense to me. You're progressive in one way, but you're still making that backward story of seven dwarves living in a cave. What the are you doing, man?
Dark rumors, heated debates, and a fairy tale remake turned upside down. This is the story of how Disney's attempt to reimagine Snow White for a new era exploded into one of the most talked about controversies in modern Hollywood. You may have heard whispers about Rachel Zegler's lead role, or Peter Dinklage's bold critiques of how the Seven Dwarfs should, or shouldn't, be portrayed. But what if there was more to this fiasco than meets the eye? How did a project filled with promise spiral into a spectacle dubbed the Snow White disaster? And why do some people believe Rachel Zegler secretly holds Peter Dinklage accountable for the entire meltdown?
Someone goes like, hey, Seven Dwarfs is offensive to midgets. You're like, oh, okay, so let's just not employ any of them.
Yes.
Hang on tight, this retelling of Disney's most infamous remake might just leave you stunned. When people think of Disney's origin story, they picture a young Walt Disney pouring heart and soul into Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, the 1937 animated masterpiece that helped build an entertainment empire. To this day, the classic stands as a cinematic landmark, cherished by generations. Remaking something so pivotal isn't just another live-action adaptation. It's rewriting the beginning of Disney's own history. That's why, when the studio announced they were tackling a new Snow White, it was more than a publicity stunt or a box office gamble. It was an attempt to reinterpret one of the world's most beloved fairy tales at a moment when cultural sensitivities and audience expectations have never been higher.
They're remaking the movie, they just got rid of the dwarfs.
Viewers wanted a delicate balance. On one side, people craved nostalgia, the charming princess, the lovable dwarves, and the timeless innocence that shaped childhoods everywhere. On the other, many felt it was time to update aspects that might be considered antiquated or problematic. Could Disney honor the original while reinventing it for modern sensibilities? Could they keep the magic alive without ignoring calls for greater inclusivity?
You actually just erased the dwarfism side of it. The disability, like we're a disability group, you just erased that whole image.
The pressure to succeed was astronomical. But from the moment production details began trickling out, small cracks appeared beneath the glossy Disney exterior.
Argument should have been from Peter Dinklage. There's power of being on TV, there's power of television, and to put seven people with dwarfism on camera in a major Disney movie, there's still power there.
Enter Rachel Zegler, a promising actress who had already earned critical praise for her vocal talents and screen presence. When word got out that she would star as Snow White, the internet lit up. Some fans applauded Disney for casting a Latina actress in a historically lily-white role. Others questioned whether changing Snow White's background might overshadow the fairy tale's traditions. The conversation started politely, then escalated as certain corners of the fandom dug in their heels. Snow White had always been described with skin as white as snow. How would Zegler's portrayal align with that? Skeptics insisted Disney was only ticking a diversity box, while supporters saw this as a progressive move that embraced a broader audience. All the while, Zegler herself radiated hope. She seemed poised to bring new energy to the story, until outside events soon tightened the vice around her budding stardom. Up to this point, most eyes were on Zegler, the new It Girl chosen to helm one of the biggest Disney classics. Then, with one searing interview, Peter Dinklage took center stage in the Snow White saga. A revered actor famous for defying stereotypes, Dinklage didn't mince words. He raised concerns about how dwarf characters might be depicted, warning that Disney risked clinging to outdated portrayals, challenging Hollywood's track record of casual caricatures. Detractors, however, insisted the original dwarfs were whimsical, not offensive, and that with proper care, Disney could maintain their essence without mocking anyone. The studio found itself in a precarious spot. If they ignored Dinklage's criticism, they'd seem out of touch. If they made major changes, they risked alienating fans who wanted a faithful adaptation. In no time, the Seven Dwarfs, long thought to be a fixed piece of the tale, became the main point of contention. Should they remain physically short-statured characters? Could advanced CGI or magical creatures stand in for them? The debate raged so fiercely that some people forgot there was even a princess at the heart of this story. Behind closed doors, Disney reportedly scrambled. Rumors flew about frantic script rewrites, abrupt changes in character design, and top executives demanding new approaches that would mollify public outcry. According to insiders, test screenings offered lukewarm feedback. Some even called them disastrous. Early audiences apparently found the film's tone jarring, with scenes that felt forcibly modern clashing against the old-world fairy tale charm. Word of backstage disarray surfaced next. One set of creative leads purportedly pushed for more traditional touches: the singing princess, comedic dwarfs, a romantic edge. Another contingent demanded full-scale innovation: a strong lead who needed no prince, accompanied by mystical sidekicks or a radically altered group dynamic. The result, sources claimed, was a jumbled patchwork. For Rachel Zegler, this must have felt like a never-ending game of script roulette. One day she might be filming a tender scene reminiscent of the 1937 classic. The next, she'd be told to reshoot it in a snappier, more empowered style. The push and pull for modern relevance took a toll on narrative coherence, culminating in a project whose identity teetered precariously at every turn. As the phrase Snow White disaster began trending across social platforms, the production reeled from an onslaught of negative chatter. Disney had weathered controversies before, like the swirl around The Little Mermaid reimagining, but the blowback here felt especially intense. Snow White wasn't just any film, it was the original jewel in Disney's crown. Critics accused the studio of half-baked progressivism, pointing out that while casting Zegler showcased inclusivity, removing or radically altering the dwarfs could inadvertently erase potential roles for short-statured actors. Everyone had an opinion, from purists who wanted no changes at all, to activists demanding an overhaul of outdated tropes. Lost in the mayhem were many of the cast members, especially Rachel Zegler herself. Despite being the film's star, she seemed overshadowed by swirling controversies that had little to do with her performance. Fans noticed her social media presence growing quieter. Cynics interpreted that as evidence she might be unhappy behind the scenes. Others assumed she was just bound by contractual obligations to keep quiet until the film's official promotion revved up, but the rumor mill refused to slow. Then, a new speculation surfaced. Rachel Zegler had supposedly singled out Peter Dinklage as the catalyst for the entire fiasco. If you dig through online gossip, you'll find claims that Zegler, in private circles, lamented how Dinklage's comments forced Disney to pivot. Those rewrites, allegedly triggered by his public criticisms, supposedly gutted the story's cohesiveness and left Zegler performing scenes that felt stitched together rather than elegantly woven. Did Zegler truly point the finger at Dinklage? No one knows for sure. But the narrative was too juicy for the internet to pass up, especially when so many fans had already wondered what went wrong behind the scenes. Some watchers believed Dinklage's bold statements were necessary to push Hollywood forward. Others griped that his remarks inadvertently caused Disney to overcorrect, creating a ripple effect that turned the film into a disjointed patchwork. Zegler's alleged frustration from that viewpoint made sense. She was the face of a project that had become a punching bag for critics, overshadowed by what many saw as the dwarfs fiasco. Still, many also argued the dwarf-related drama was only one ingredient in a cauldron already brimming with questionable creative decisions. Perhaps Dinklage merely lit the spark that revealed deeper flaws. But that wasn't the end of the story, because even as fans argued over blame, Disney had more trouble brewing. As soon as test screening feedback hinted that the film might flop, whispers emerged about Disney plotting a second attempt, one that could quietly replace the Snow White as soon as possible. Rumor had it that Jenna Ortega, fresh off her skyrocketing fame and lauded comedic timing, was at the top of a dream-casting wish list. Could Disney be planning to wipe the slate clean and relaunch an entirely different version? The mere idea set social media ablaze. Proponents of Ortega argued she'd bring a delightful mix of charm and backbone, someone whose star power matched audiences' modern tastes. Skeptics balked, wondering if Disney seriously intended to invest in two separate productions, or if this was just a cunning rumor fueled by fans hoping to see Ortega in more lead roles. Meanwhile, the original Snow White film with Zegler was nearing its release, weighed down by the unstoppable avalanche of controversy. Some fans embraced the talk of a do-over, seeing it as a chance to correct mistakes. Others saw it as a betrayal of the cast and crew who had already poured their hearts into the first project. Either way, the chatter hammered home a single point. The legacy of Snow White, the once untouchable pillar of Disney magic, now stood on shaky ground. But even in the midst of possible reboots, the lingering question remained: Would the final film unravel everything fans once loved? Or could it still salvage a spark of enchantment? When the film finally debuted, critics and audiences alike flooded social media with harsh takes. The dwarfs, now partially replaced or reimagined as magical creatures, depending on which rumor you believed, felt underdeveloped or downright missing in action. Zegler's performance drew mixed reviews. Some praised her singing and emotional expressions, while others felt she came across as disconnected, likely the byproduct of frantic script shifts that never gave her a stable foundation. Industry insiders took notes. Some used the fiasco to illustrate the perils of unplanned wokeness, a phrase used by critics who felt Disney introduced new social angles with little cohesive vision. Others saw it as a cautionary lesson that studios must handle beloved classics with greater finesse. If you're going to challenge tradition, you'd better have a carefully mapped plan, and a cast and crew aligned behind that plan. Behind the scenes, Disney's marketing team scrambled to put a positive spin on the release. They emphasized the updated messaging of empowerment and inclusivity, but the tagline, "Snow White Disaster," overshadowed most attempts at redemption. In many circles, the film became synonymous with misguided modernization. Meanwhile, fans relitigated the question of blame. Had Rachel Zegler done enough to champion a more coherent story? Or was the production simply out of her control? What about Peter Dinklage? Was he just raising valid concerns? Or did his outspokenness inadvertently sabotage what could have been a respectful, inclusive portrayal of dwarf characters? In the end, perhaps no one will ever know precisely who or what is to blame. Major motion pictures like Snow White involve thousands of creative decisions, any one of which can spark a chain reaction. Peter Dinklage spoke his truth about representation. Rachel Zegler tried to breathe new life into an 85-year-old classic. Disney, faced with a torrent of competing demands, seems to have performed a panicked juggling act, dropping too many balls in the process. Still, the fiasco remains a powerful warning for Hollywood. Modernizing iconic stories isn't as simple as adding a handful of inclusivity boxes. When core themes and characters get drastically reworked, you risk losing the very essence that endeared audiences in the first place. For better or worse, Snow White is no ordinary film. It's a piece of Disney's identity. Messing with it requires more than just bold casting or clever marketing lines. It demands a unified, thoughtful approach that respects both classic charm and evolving cultural sensibilities. So did Rachel Zegler truly blame Peter Dinklage for everything that went wrong? Unless she confirms it outright, we're left with rumors and speculation. We do know this much. Once the Snow White disaster label stuck, it was nearly impossible to remove. Fans and critics alike latched on, forever linking the project to a cautionary tale of what happens when a studio tries to reconcile nostalgia with modern demands, but loses sight of a coherent vision. For audiences, the fiasco might be a fascinating reminder that even the biggest studios can fumble their own legacy. For Disney, it's a lesson that real progress requires more than surface-level tweaks. It requires deeper respect, open dialogue, and a plan that doesn't rely on last-minute rewrites to avert public relations nightmares. And for anyone else who dreams of retelling a beloved fairy tale, The Meltdown teaches one key truth. If you're going to invoke the magic of a classic, make sure you aren't unweaving the very spell that made it timeless. With whispers of a second live-action Snow White swirling, potentially with a new star and a different creative team, the stage is set for a Hollywood redemption arc, or yet another cautionary chapter. Whether that project materializes or remains rumor, the controversies of the past year have taught us all to watch carefully whenever a beloved story undergoes extreme renovations. Because even the brightest sparkle of Disney magic can vanish if the foundation of a fairy tale is shaken too hard. And so, the final chapter of the Snow White disaster is still unwritten. But one thing is certain. Whenever you see that iconic Disney castle logo flicker across the screen, you'll remember how one courageous actress, an outspoken actor, and a century-old fairy tale collided to create a spectacle that no one saw coming and no one will soon forget. If you liked this video, don't forget to hit like and subscribe for more stories like this.